Clara Whitmore's heart pounded in her chest as the auctioneer's gavel fell. The sound echoed through the hot, dry air, sharp and final. She was nothing more than an object now, no better than the cattle that were often sold in these same town squares. Shackled, humiliated, and branded like an animal, she had stopped thinking about escape. Her mind had turned to survival long ago. The crowd's eyes drilled into her, some leering, others with judgmental disdain. It was a quiet kind of terror that filled her, the fear of being bought, of being claimed by a stranger who would see her as nothing more than property to use as he pleased. The harsh sun above her made her skin burn, but she felt the chill deep in her bones. Her body stiffened, every muscle locked. She knew what was coming. The blow would come next, the backhand, the fist, the slap. It always did. She had been trained for it, had learned to absorb it without reacting, to stay still and take the punishment, because defiance brought worse. She squeezed her eyes shut in anticipation, bracing for impact. But it never came. Instead, she heard something else. A soft click. Then another. A gentle sound, so quiet against the noise of the auction that for a moment Clara wasn't sure she had heard it at all. She opened her eyes, confused. Standing before her was a man, tall and broad-shouldered. His movements were calm, deliberate, as he worked the lock on the shackles around her wrists. He didn't touch her, didn't even look at her body, not like the others. He didn't leer or judge. He simply released her from the chains that had bound her for weeks. Her shackles fell to the ground with a dull thud, the sound so loud in Clara's ears that for a moment she couldn't breathe. She had forgotten what it felt like to be free, even for a moment. The man didn't look back at her. He was already walking away, counting out coins to the auctioneer. Gold coins. More than most people in Brackett, Texas saw in a year. Clara felt a strange mix of confusion and awe. He hadn't bought her. He hadn't touched her. He was just walking away, as if his only purpose was to give her this one gift of freedom. The auctioneer was stunned, his mouth gaping open. Clara blinked, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had been sold to the highest bidder for days, humiliated by the crowds, treated like an animal. But this man, this stranger, hadn't come to claim her as his property. He hadn't come to own her. His hand was still on the gold coins. He had purchased nothing but her freedom. Clara looked at him as he moved away, her heart racing. She didn't know his name, didn't know his intentions, didn't know a thing about him. But in that one moment, as the shackles fell to the ground, something inside of her shifted. The weight she had carried for so long, the suffocating fear and hopelessness, began to lift. The crowd watched in silence. No one spoke. They couldn't understand it. The man had not claimed her, had not even spoken to her. But the act itself, the unspoken promise of something different, was louder than any words. He turned, pausing at the edge of the crowd. His eyes met hers for the briefest of moments. It was nothing more than a glance, but it felt like a lifeline. There was no judgment there, no pity. Just a quiet acknowledgement that she was a person, not a piece of property. His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary before he turned and walked out of the square. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing, her body still trembling from the sudden rush of freedom. She had always been owned. She had always been someone's possession. But not anymore. The crowd began to murmur, a mix of confusion and frustration. A few men shouted after the stranger, calling him a fool for wasting such a fortune on a woman like her. But Clara didn't hear them. She didn't hear anything except the pounding of her own heartbeat, and the silence that followed the man's departure. He hadn't bought her. He had saved her. Clara stood motionless, the weight of her newfound freedom sinking in with every breath. The crowd, still murmuring, gradually began to disperse, moving on with their lives as if nothing had happened. But for Clara, everything had changed. Her wrists burned from the shackles that had held her, the flesh still raw where they had chafed her skin. She absent-mindedly touched the brand on her left wrist, the raised W still fresh and angry, a mark that had made her a possession in the eyes of everyone. She had been Marcus Webb's property, his to sell, to use, to break, And yet, standing here on this dusty platform in front of a crowd of strangers, she was free. She could feel it, even if she wasn't sure how long that freedom would last. Her gaze turned back to the man who had walked away without a single glance at her, his silhouette disappearing into the distance. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, didn't know what his plan was. But something deep inside her, a part she thought was long buried, was filled with a spark of hope. What now? For the first time in a long while, Clara didn't know what to do with herself. She could feel the old instincts kicking in, the fear of being abandoned, of being left alone in a world that had always seen her as a thing. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to take a step, then another, until she found herself moving slowly, hesitantly, toward the edge of the platform. The town square was still full of people. Some had stayed, others had gone. But they all had one thing in common. They didn't care about her. Not really. To them, she was just another piece of property sold to the highest bidder, the same as the cattle or the horses, bought and sold for what they were worth. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her legs feeling like lead as she walked through the crowd, the eyes of the townsfolk following her every move. A few men looked her up and down, their eyes lingering, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She needed to leave. To get away from the square and the people who had watched her, judged her, sold her. The sun beat down on her, the oppressive heat, making it hard to think, to breathe. She walked toward the edge of town, toward the livery where the stranger had left his horses. But she didn't know where he had gone, or if he even wanted her to follow. Clara stopped at the livery door, the old wood creaking beneath her boots. The horses were still there, waiting, two of them, one chestnut and one bay. Her eyes shifted to the man's saddle that was still on the bay's back, his belongings scattered on the floor as though he'd been ready to leave in a hurry. She couldn't just stand here. She couldn't let this chance slip away, not after everything she had gone through. Clara reached for the reins of the bay, her fingers trembling as she untied the horse. The chestnut looked at her for a moment but remained calm. She could do this. She had to do this. Her heart raced, her mind still reeling from the sudden change. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. He hadn't bought her. He hadn't touched her. He had simply freed her. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, Clara felt like she had a choice. The sound of approaching footsteps broke through her thoughts, and Clara froze, her pulse quickening. She turned, half expecting to see Marcus Webb or one of his men coming to drag her back. But instead, it was the stranger, the man who had bought her freedom. He was walking toward her, his boots kicking up dust as he approached. His face was still partially shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, but Clara could see the calm determination in his eyes. He didn't look at her with pity or judgment, not the way everyone else had. His gaze was steady, focused, like she was just another person, a person worthy of respect. "You're leaving?" His voice was low, steady, like the ground beneath his feet had been as solid as his resolve. Clara swallowed, struggling to find her voice. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what she was supposed to do now. Her world had just turned upside down, and here he was, this man who had come from nowhere, offering her a chance. I don't know," she finally managed to say. "I don't know where to go." The man nodded, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face, his jaw tight. "You've been through more than a person should bear," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "But you're still standing. That means something." Clara flinched. She wasn't used to hearing words like that. She wasn't used to hearing someone speak to her like she wasn't just a piece of meat, like she had some worth beyond what others had made her into. He didn't wait for her to speak. Instead, he moved toward the horses, grabbing the reins of the chestnut. Clara hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she should follow, unsure of what he wanted. But something deep inside urged her to trust him, even if she didn't fully understand why. She needed to trust him. She needed to trust herself. "You're not going back to that auction," he said without turning around. His voice was firm, but there was no malice in it. It was a statement, not a question. Clara didn't argue. She didn't know what the next step would be or what the stranger wanted from her. But for the first time in years, she felt like she had the freedom to choose. And right now, that was enough. Clara felt the weight of the reins in her hands as she mounted the bay. The horse was calm, as though it had been waiting for her, as though it knew what was happening. The leather creaked beneath her fingers as she adjusted her grip, her heart still racing from everything that had happened. The stranger, Caleb, she realized now, as he turned his attention back to her, moved with quiet purpose, untying the chestnut's reins and leading it toward her. He had said nothing more since their brief exchange at the livery, but there was something in the way he moved, the way his shoulders were set, that told her he was accustomed to hard work, to taking charge when necessary. "Are you coming?" Caleb's voice, low and steady, was barely more than a whisper, but it sent a strange jolt through her. Clara hesitated, her mind still reeling from the auction, from the strangers who had bought her, sold her, judged her. But this man, this stranger, was different. He hadn't claimed her. He hadn't even looked at her like she was something to own. For the first time in a long time, Clara didn't feel like an object. With a deep breath, she urged the horse forward, feeling the muscles beneath her shift as it walked into the sunlight. Caleb kept his stride steady, not rushing her, allowing her the space she needed. They rode in silence for a while, the only sound the soft clip-clop of hooves on dirt, the whisper of wind through the dry grass. The heat was oppressive, hanging in the air like a weight that made it hard to breathe, but for the first time, Clara didn't mind it. The sun on her skin felt different now, more like warmth than the oppressive heat she had known in her past. The town of Brackett fell away behind them, a dusty, tired little place that had held her captive for so long. The wooden buildings, the general store, the livery, it all seemed so small now, so distant. Clara's eyes scanned the land ahead, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Who was this man? What did he want from her? Why had he paid so much money for her freedom? She didn't understand, but she also didn't feel the need to. Not yet. Caleb slowed his horse after a while, pulling up beside a ridge that overlooked a stretch of open land. The view was wide and vast, the landscape rolling beneath them with patches of golden grass and scattered oak trees. Clara couldn't remember the last time she had seen something so open, so full of possibility. It felt like the first breath of air after being trapped for far too long. "This is it," Caleb said, his voice soft but resolute. "My place is just over the ridge." Clara didn't know what to say. The idea of a place that belonged to someone else, a place that wasn't owned by a man like Marcus Webb, seemed almost too good to be true. She couldn't picture it, couldn't imagine living in a place where she wouldn't be just another thing, something to use, something to break. But there was a strange tug in her chest, a pull that made her want to believe in it. They rode on, the land stretching before them, quiet and endless. Clara focused on the rhythm of her horse's movements, the sound of her own breath, the steady beat of her heart. She couldn't help but think of the life she had left behind. Back in Brackett, they had called her property. She had been sold. But here, in this vast, open land, she was just a woman, just a person. The sight of a small cabin broke her thoughts. It sat nestled between clusters of trees, surrounded by a well-tended yard and a barn in the distance. Caleb dismounted smoothly, leading both horses toward a nearby hitching post. Clara followed suit, her legs unsteady as she swung herself down from the bay. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it wasn't this. The cabin was simple, but it had a kind of quiet dignity about it, the kind of place that felt like it had been built with care, with hard work. It was small, just enough for 1 or 2 people, but it had a porch and a window that caught the last rays of sunlight. Clara couldn't imagine herself in a place like this, couldn't imagine herself feeling safe here, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could. Caleb led her toward the front door, his steps sure and steady. "Come on in," he said, his tone still kind but distant, as though giving her space to make her own choice. "You can rest here. You've been through enough." Quote. Clara hesitated at the door, unsure whether to step inside. She had always been told where to go, where to stand, where to sleep. Her feet had never been her own, not really. But now, standing on the threshold of this little cabin, she had a choice. She could step inside, or she could turn away. She could make a decision that was hers alone. Her eyes flickered to Caleb, who was looking at her with quiet patience, waiting. No judgment, no expectation. With a deep breath, Clara stepped over the threshold. The inside was as simple as the outside. Wooden floors, a small table, a stone fireplace against one wall. A bed in the corner, unmade but welcoming. A few shelves, filled with books, tools, and some carefully arranged trinkets. It was sparse but comfortable, the kind of place someone could live in without feeling suffocated by what they didn't have. Caleb moved toward the fireplace, reaching for some wood to stoke the fire. Clara stood in the doorway, still unsure of what to do with herself, still feeling out of place, like she didn't belong here. "Sit," Caleb said quietly, gesturing toward the table. "I'll make us something to eat. You must be hungry." Clara nodded, but her body felt heavy, as though the weight of everything, her past, her present, her future, was settling on her shoulders. She couldn't remember the last time she had sat down for a meal that wasn't given to her as part of her captivity. Even now, she didn't know if she could trust herself to sit and eat freely, to let go of the fear that had haunted her for so long. But she sat, and Caleb set a simple meal before her, beans, cornbread, and water, and Clara felt something inside her loosen. It wasn't much. It wasn't a grand feast, but for the first time in months, it was hers. No one else's. Just hers. Clara sat at the small wooden table, the weight of the spoon in her hand feeling unfamiliar. She hadn't realized how much she'd forgotten, how to eat slowly, how to sit still, how to enjoy something without fear of someone barging in and taking it from her. The beans, simple and warm, were the best thing she'd tasted in a long time. Though she ate in silence, her thoughts still spinning. Caleb sat across from her, his eyes steady, watching her, with a quiet intensity that made her uncomfortable. It wasn't the kind of look she was used to, eyes filled with greed, with hunger, with judgment. No, Caleb's gaze was calm, thoughtful, as though he was waiting for something, but not pushing her to give it. "You're still in shock," he said softly after a while, breaking the silence between them. His voice had a comforting rhythm to it, like a steady pulse that steadied her own. "I can see it. You're here, but not really here. That's all right. You've been through hell. No one expects you to know what to do with this." Clara paused, the spoon hovering over the bowl. He was right. She didn't know what to do with the space she found herself in. She didn't know what to do with the freedom he had given her. Her whole life had been defined by chains, by people who saw her as something to own, something to control. Now, here, there were no chains, no one telling her what to do or where to go. But that freedom felt heavy, like it could slip through her fingers if she wasn't careful. "I'm not used to this," she admitted, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. "Not used to having a choice. Not used to being free." Caleb nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. He didn't say anything at first, just let her words hang in the air, like he was giving her space to understand them. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was full of unspoken things that neither of them knew how to say. "I can't promise it'll be easy," Caleb said, breaking the silence at last. His voice was gentle, but there was an edge to it, a quiet determination. "You're going to have to fight for this. Fight for your own place in this world, because the world's not going to give it to you. It'll try to take it back. Men like Marcus Webb, they don't let go of their possessions easily." Clara's breath caught at the mention of Webb's name. The memories of him, the brand, the pain, the fear, came rushing back, threatening to swallow her whole. She clenched her fists beneath the table, the old scars on her skin burning as if they had just been marked. "I'm not going back," she said, the words sharp, as though speaking them aloud made them more real. She looked down at her hands, her voice quieter now. "I'm not going to be anyone's property again." Caleb's expression softened, and for the first time since they had met, Clara saw something in him that she hadn't noticed before. Understanding. It was a fleeting thing, but it was enough. "You're not," he said, his voice firm. "You're not anyone's property, and you never will be again. Not as long as I can help it." For a moment, Clara just looked at him, her heart pounding. It wasn't a promise she could hold on to, not fully. Too many promises had been broken before. Too many people had made her believe in things, only to take them away. But Caleb wasn't like the others. She could see it in the way he moved, in the quiet strength he carried with him. He wasn't offering her a dream or a fantasy. He was offering her something real, a chance to build something for herself, to live without fear, to breathe freely. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded, taking a deep breath as if the very act of accepting his words might give her the strength to stand on her own. Caleb stood, moving toward the fireplace with his usual steady gait. The fire crackled and popped as he stoked it, the warmth filling the room. Clara watched him, unsure of what to say next, her mind still tangled in confusion. "What happens now?" she asked softly, almost to herself. "I mean, now that I'm here, what do I do? What's next?" Caleb paused, turning to face her. His expression was thoughtful, but there was no hesitation in his voice when he answered. "We start small," he said, his tone practical. "We take it one step at a time. You'll help me around the ranch, learn the land, the animals, the work. It won't be easy. It won't always be fair. But it's honest work. And you'll be paid fairly. You'll have your own room, your own space, no one telling you what to do." Quote. Clara bit her lip, uncertainty flickering in her chest. "What if I'm no good at it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I don't know how to work like that? How to be useful again?" Caleb smiled, a small, quiet thing that softened his features. It was the first smile Clara had seen that wasn't forced, wasn't for show. It was warm, like the sun on a cold day. "You'll be fine," he said simply. "We'll figure it out together." The night passed in a quiet, almost peaceful way, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Clara allowed herself to relax. She could hear the wind whispering through the trees outside, and the crackle of the fire. But more than that, she could hear something else, the quiet hum of her own thoughts, thoughts that were no longer just filled with fear, but with the faintest trace of something else. Hope. She was no longer trapped. She wasn't owned. She was free. The next morning came too quickly, the sun casting a golden light over the land outside the cabin. Caleb had already risen, preparing to tend to the animals. He greeted Clara with a simple nod when she emerged from the cabin, her boots still heavy from the night's sleep. "Ready to get started?" Caleb asked, his voice calm and steady. Clara hesitated, her heart fluttering with nerves, but she met his gaze with a sense of determination she hadn't known she was capable of. "Ready," she said. And for the first time, it felt like she really was. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm that felt both foreign and comforting. Clara had never known a life like this. The slow, honest work that filled her mornings and the quiet evenings spent by the fire. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, but each night she went to bed feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. At first, she had been tentative, unsure of her place in the ranch's daily routine. Caleb showed her the ropes, guiding her through the tasks with patience and a steady hand. She learned to care for the animals, feeding the horses, brushing them down after long days, cleaning the stables. And she grew accustomed to the quiet hum of ranch life, where the work never ended, but neither did the sense of purpose it gave her. "You're getting the hang of this," Caleb said one afternoon as they worked together in the garden. His voice was casual, but there was a quiet pride in it that made Clara's heart skip. "Your hands are starting to look like a rancher's." Clara glanced at her hands, rough and calloused now from the work, and for the first time, she didn't mind. It felt good to have her hands doing something real, something meaningful. "I never thought I'd be good at this," Clara said, wiping her brow as the summer sun beat down on them. "I never thought I'd be good for anything." Caleb paused, turning to her with a soft smile. "You're good for more than you know, Clara. You're learning, growing. That's what matters." You don't have to have it all figured out, but every day you're getting closer to who you're meant to be." Quote. The words were simple, but they struck Clara like a bolt of lightning. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have everything figured out. She could just be. And that was enough. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's confidence grew. She found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life, her body adjusting to the labor, her mind adjusting to the peace. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes the work was grueling, and there were days when the weight of her past felt too heavy to bear. But every time she doubted herself, Caleb was there, steady and unyielding, offering her the space to breathe and the chance to heal. "You're doing better than you think," he would say whenever she hesitated, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of her thoughts. And she believed him. Slowly but surely, Clara began to believe in herself again. One evening, as the sun began to set over the ranch, Caleb led Clara to the barn, where he had been working on a new project. The air was cool, the light soft and golden as it filtered through the barn's open doors. The sound of hooves and the gentle rustle of hay filled the silence as Caleb pulled a piece of wood from a pile near the corner. "What's this?" Clara asked, her curiosity piqued. Caleb didn't answer right away, his eyes focused on the wood as he measured it carefully. "Something I've been working on," he said, a slight grin playing at the corner of his mouth. Clara watched as he worked, her heart fluttering with the anticipation of what was to come. It wasn't until Caleb finished cutting the wood and began to piece it together that she realized what he was making: a small rocking chair. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she saw the shape begin to take form. It was simple, rustic, but the care Caleb was putting into it was undeniable. It wasn't just a chair, it was something more. It was a symbol, a promise. "Do you like it?" Caleb asked, looking up at her with an almost hesitant expression. Clara was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the quiet beauty of the gesture. She hadn't realized how much she needed this. A piece of peace, something built with care and love, something that wasn't tainted by her past, something that belonged to her. "It's beautiful," she finally said, her voice soft, her eyes filling with unshed tears. Caleb smiled, a genuine, warm smile that lit up his face. "It's for you, for your new life here, for all the things that are coming." Clara blinked, surprised by the weight of his words. New life, coming. She hadn't thought of it that way, but Caleb was right. She was building something here, something more than just survival. She was learning to live again, to hope again. The days continued to pass, and as summer began to fade into autumn, Clara felt the weight of her past lifting more and more. She spent time with May, helping her in the garden, listening to her stories, and learning the ways of the land. May had become more than just a friend. She was a guide, a reminder that healing didn't come quickly, but it came all the same. "Just one step at a time, child," May would tell her, whenever Clara expressed doubts about her progress. "You can't rush healing. You just have to trust it'll come." And Clara trusted May. She trusted Caleb. For the first time, she trusted herself. One afternoon, as they were finishing up in the fields, Caleb stopped and turned to her, a contemplative look on his face. "You know," he said, his voice quiet, "I never thought I'd find someone like you." Clara raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "I mean it," Caleb continued, his gaze unwavering. "I've spent most of my life on this land, working it, trying to forget the things I've lost. But when I saw you, when I saw what you went through, it made me want to do something different. You've taught me more than I ever thought I'd learn. You've shown me what it really means to live, not just survive." Clara's heart stilled in her chest, his words settling into her like a quiet, comforting truth. She had never been anyone's teacher before. She had never thought of herself as someone who could change another person's life. But Caleb was right. In some ways, they had both been teaching each other. They had both been learning to live again, one step at a time. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Caleb smiled, his eyes soft with something she couldn't quite place. "You don't need to thank me. You're the one who's teaching me." Clara smiled back, the weight in her chest finally easing. Maybe there was more to this new life than she had thought. Maybe it wasn't just about survival. Maybe it was about building something. Maybe it was about love. For the first time in years, Clara felt something inside her shift. A faint, fragile flicker of hope. The months stretched on, and Clara's life at the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. She had found herself, not in the way she had expected, but in a way that was quieter, steadier. The work never stopped, and neither did the healing, but each day she grew stronger, more certain of her place in this world. Autumn painted the land in shades of gold and amber, and the air had grown crisp with the promise of winter. The harvest was winding down, and Clara had spent the past few weeks helping Caleb prepare the ranch for the colder months. There was a comfort in the routine now, a certainty in the way the days flowed, one after the other, each task a small victory. The scent of the earth, the crackle of the fire, the sound of the horses, hooves as they worked together, it all felt like a quiet symphony of survival, of something more. But even in the peace of these days, Clara couldn't forget what had brought her here. The scars on her wrist still throbbed with the memory of Marcus Webb's brand, his claim on her. Sometimes, late at night, she would wake in a cold sweat, the remnants of the past haunting her. But each time, Caleb was there, his steady presence grounding her, reminding her that she was no longer his. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb pulled her aside, his eyes darker than usual, his voice tinged with something Clara couldn't quite place. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his gaze fixed on her, like he could see beneath the surface, beneath the carefully constructed walls she had built. "What's on your mind?" Clara hesitated, unsure of how to explain the storm inside her. She had never been good at putting her emotions into words, never been able to tell anyone the depths of what she had lost. But here, with Caleb, something felt different. He was patient, understanding, without asking her to give more than she was ready to. "I don't know if I'll ever feel whole again," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Sometimes, when I'm here, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm starting to live again. But then something reminds me of him, of the things I've been through. And it's like it all comes rushing back. The brand, the auction, the years I spent like I didn't matter." Caleb stepped closer, his hand warm on her arm. "You matter," he said quietly. "You've always mattered. You just didn't know it yet." Her eyes flickered to the ground, a mixture of pain and disbelief crossing her face. "How can you say that? How can you know what it's like? How can you know what it feels like to be used, to be owned?" Caleb's expression softened, his gaze turning inward for a moment. "I know more than you think," he said after a beat. "I've lost my share, lost my family, lost my peace, lost myself for a while. But I'm still here, and I'm still trying, and you're here too. We've both been broken, Clara. But it doesn't mean we can't be whole again, not if we keep fighting." Clara looked up at him, her chest tightening with the intensity of his words. She had never expected someone like him to understand, someone who had his own scars, his own battles. But in that moment, she saw it, the quiet bond they shared. Two people who had been shattered by the world, but were now piecing themselves back together, bit by bit. "You're right," she said softly. "I've been running for so long, I didn't know how to stop, how to heal. But I want to try. I want to learn to live again with you." Caleb's eyes softened, a flicker of relief passing through them. "You don't have to do it alone. Not anymore." Days passed, and Clara's sense of peace grew. There were still moments of fear, still flashes of the past that threatened to pull her under. But each time, Caleb was there, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Together, they had built something, and for the first time in her life, Clara felt like she had a future that was hers to shape. One evening, as they sat on the porch, the sky painted in shades of deep purple and gold, Clara rested her head against Caleb's shoulder, a sense of calm settling over her. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her voice quiet in the stillness of the evening, "about the future, about what comes next." Caleb turned to her, his expression calm but attentive. "What do you mean?" Clara hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I never thought I'd be able to have a future. I always thought I was just surviving, just waiting for the next thing to happen. But now, I see it. I see what we've built here. What I've built. And I want to keep building. I want to help other women like I was helped. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. I want to help them see that they can be free too. Quote. Caleb's eyes softened with pride, his hand gently brushing her hair back. You're already doing it. You're already helping. Just by being here, by showing others what it means to survive, to fight. You're giving them hope, Clara. And that's everything. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. She had been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. She wasn't going to let the darkness of her past define her anymore. And with Caleb by her side, she knew she could do anything. As the seasons changed and the first signs of winter began to creep into the land, Clara's resolve only grew stronger. She worked with Caleb to expand the ranch, making it more than just a home. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for, everything they had overcome. Together they built something that wasn't just about survival, but about thriving. It was a place where hope was alive, where love was real, and where every day was a victory. One crisp morning, as Clara stood by the barn, watching the horses graze in the pasture, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Caleb standing beside her, a small smile on his face. "I was thinking," he said, his voice low, "we should build something else, a house for the future." Clara's heart skipped a beat as she looked up at him. "A house?" Caleb nodded, his smile widening. "A real house, with rooms for us, and rooms for whatever comes next." Clara's chest tightened as the weight of his words settled over her. A house, a home, a future. She had never imagined it, never thought she could have something so simple, so beautiful. "I want that," she said quietly, the words barely more than a whisper. Caleb took her hand, his grip strong and sure. "Then we'll build it, together." And for the first time in a long time, Clara believed it. She believed in the future. She believed in herself. She believed in Caleb. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Archives of the Wild West, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.